right, welcome back, everyone. So some big stories for the night. Now, you might remember that Biden actually canceled the building of the wall, the one that Trump started building along the U.S. Mexico border. Well, it turns out now that Texas is going to start building its own wall, finishing what Biden started. The governor down there just mentioned it. And it looks like now also other states are stepping in to help secure the border because the federal government under Biden, they say, isn't doing the job as they would like. Among them, for example, being Florida, sending different police and officers to go help Texas secure its border. Interesting developments, folks, because it fits into this broader picture we've been looking at of really state sovereignty, states taking things into their own hands, relying less on the federal government, and really, again, some of the same players, Texas and Florida in this case, and again, many other states may be stepping in as well. We'll have to see what happens with it. Folks, also talk about Trump coming back on the main stage. Quite literally, Trump is going to start campaigning. Well, getting behind other people's campaigns, I should say. And Trump is going to start his rallies this month. Actually, it looks like June 26th, first rally lined up. That's going to be in Cleveland. And so, folks, a lot going on, a lot to talk about. And as always, folks, real good to see you all. As you can see, I'm still on the road. And some good stuff in the works. Let's put it that way. On the road for a reason. The reason of which you shall soon see. Hopefully, so everything goes according to plan. Some good stuff in the works. And folks, as always, good seeing you all. Yeah, Jack Delaney, good seeing you as always. Mayra Anderson, thank you, Florida. Yeah, I think a lot of people are feeling that one. Debbie Mezzi, hey, go Texas. Yeah, folks, good stuff as always. Good seeing y'all. A lot to go into as always. If you have questions, leave them in the chat. Around the halfway point, we'll try to get to them. And then, of course, 45 minutes in, we'll jump over to Epoch TV. We got some updates of what's going on with the election investigations. Hey, Katie Slaney say you missed my bookcase. The bookcase is still at my home waiting for me, but hard to travel with. You know what I mean? All right, folks, that said, let's jump into the first story for the night. Some good stuff to go into. First off, let's talk about what's happening in Texas with the governor now talking about building their own wall. Epoch Times reports, Texas governor unveils strategy for border wall construction. And it says he approved $250 million as the down payment for it. Now, keep in mind, if Texas were a country, Texas would be one of the top richest countries in the world. It's a big GDP, big earner. Again, technically one of the top GDPs in the world. They got the money for it, right? It says here, Texas Governor Greg Abbott announced key components of the Lone Star State's plan to build its own barrier along the 1,200-mile border with Mexico at a press conference in Austin on Wednesday, including authorizing $250 million as a down payment, right, part of it, to kickstart, again, the process of doing so. Now it says, the Republican governor said that the funds are being drawn from state budget, which allocates $1.1 billion to border security. This means that of their $1.1 billion they're spending on border security, $250 million of that they're dedicating again towards building the wall, at least initially, right? It's a down payment on it. Now, a letter authorizing the transfer of the funds was signed at the press conference by Abbott, Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, State House Speaker Dade Phelan, State Senator Jane Nelson, and State Representative Greg Bonin. Now, Abbott, governor, also signed a separate letter directing the Texas Facilities Commission to hire a project manager to oversee the border wall construction, as well as the planning and execution of the construction, meaning it's not just the announcement of the budget for it, it also included the announcement of steps to start making it happen. They're already going to start it, folks. Now, the project manager will also be in charge of hiring contractors and subcontractors to build the wall. And once hired, the program manager and contractors will identify state land and land that private landowners and local governments can volunteer for the wall. Similar to the way Trump was planning to build his wall, actually. Now, it says as well, Anyone can donate as well to the construction of the wall via the donation page www.borderwall.texas.gov, according to Abbott. Now, the Texas Division of Emergency Management will manage the donations. So it's being done through their emergency management branch. At the conference, Abbott also signed a letter, interestingly, to President Joe Biden to demand that the Biden administration return any land taken by the federal government, which is interesting, taken by the federal government under prior administrations to build the border wall that is yet to be used for that purpose. In other words, Trump already went through the process of acquiring, the land, of getting everything set up to build his wall, and the federal government still has that land, even though it doesn't appear that the Biden administration has plans to actually finish building the wall. There's been mixed reports on it. Doesn't seem like it's happening just yet. Governor Abbott, again, in Texas, is telling Biden now to hand back that land so they can start building their own wall. Now, I said this: the federal government used condemnation powers to take property from Texans for the purpose of building a border wall. Once you took office, however, this is, again, Abbott to Biden. Once you took office, however, your administration made clear the federal government will not move forward with building the border wall at this time. And this is, again, Abbott telling this to Biden in this letter. And once returned, Texas authorities will visit with Texans whose land was taken by the federal government to determine if they will allow the state of Texas to build a wall on their land. In other words, after they get the land back from the federal government, they're going to start approaching those individuals who had that land and see if they can use it again for Texas to build the Texas wall. Now, another thing I'll go into just a minute, folks, but an important part with this, remember the story we had on the last episode. In Texas now, they have declared that they're going to become a constitutional state. In other words, under the 10th Amendment of the American Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, states actually have a lot of rights. And the federal government actually doesn't have a lot of rights. Technically, if you go back to the time of the Founding Fathers, even the Bill of Rights didn't stretch down to the state level. That was changed under really the time of 1940s, 1950s. That was under Roosevelt. They changed that. But Texas still can assert this 10th Amendment right, which all states can actually assert, which basically says that the limits of power of the federal government are only within what is stipulated within the Constitution. Anything not stipulated, anything not directly stated in the U.S. Constitution is actually with the states. Anything beyond that is again with the states. And that means the federal government actually has very little authority over states. Meaning that if a state like Texas, as they have now declared, chooses to abide by the 10th Amendment, which they said they're going to do, well, it means the federal government actually has very little say over what happens in Texas. It's an interesting shift, folks. I'd love to see whether other states step in. And on the note of other states stepping in, here comes Florida. So let's talk what's happening with that. Florida Governor DeSantis sending police to deal with border crisis in Arizona and in Texas. And so DeSantis, Florida, not having at least not a land border with Latin America, is again sending police and different authorities to go help with Texas and Arizona to help them secure their border. Now it says, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced Wednesday that he has authorized sending police to the U.S. Mexico border in Arizona and Texas after the two respective states requested it. They asked for help from other states. DeSantis, a Republican, said Florida is the first state to answer a letter from Governors Greg Abbott and Doug Ducey, both also Republicans, that asked all other states for help in policing the border. Basically, they're saying the border situation is completely out of control. They can't handle it on their own. They're asking other states to step in and help them. And maybe because they don't have to get extra hiring, they can have the, let's say, leftover budget to build the wall to stop the problem, at least as far as they see it, right? Now, on this note, this is what he's saying. He said, we're here today because we have problems in Florida that are not organic to Florida that we've been forced to deal with over many years, but particularly over the last 6 months because of the failure of the Biden administration to secure our southern border. DeSantis said this during an event on Wednesday, today. And indeed, to really do anything constructive about what is going on in the southern border, uh, you know, moving on what's happening on the southern border to, again, secure the issue locally of mass illegal immigration happening in Florida as well and other states. Now, law enforcement officials from a number of sheriff's offices, Fish and Wildlife Conservation, and the Florida Highway Patrol will be sent to the two states. So different branches, law enforcement heading to Texas, heading to Arizona. We'll have to see again if other states start doing it as well. Well, to see if Arizona, for example, decides to start building its own border wall. California might, but actually California has a fairly complete border wall. The San Diego sector of the border wall is actually probably the best in the country. In fact, the wall type that Trump was planning to build across the entire U.S. Mexico border was based on the Type 2 bollard fencing that they have across most of the border region in San Diego. Actually, I've done some reporting on it. Check out the videos I have, folks. Actually, if you go to the homepage of Crossroads on YouTube, I actually have a video of me, if you haven't seen it, crawling through one of the smuggling tunnels that they have at the border. Border Patrol there before all the lockdowns and everything actually gave us a nice tour of the border and actually opened up one of the manholes, which led into one of the cartel tunnels used for drug trafficking, some human trafficking, mostly drug trafficking. And yeah, it was interesting. They have a whole rail system down there and everything. But San Diego actually has pretty good border patrol. Border patrol and a very strong border wall. And again, the California border is one part of it. A lot of smuggling has gone to boats and things like that. But also in other states, you don't have this because you have much longer borders, much more difficult borders. And again, other states now looking to secure their own using that same type of fencing that Southern California has. Now, on this note, guess who else is stepping into this whole issue? Well, none other than Donald Trump. Epoch Times reports that Trump is going to join Governor Abbott on visit to the U.S. Mexico border. It says here, former President Donald Trump plans to join Texas Governor Greg Abbott during a June 30th visit. Now, June 30th, this month, of course, and that's just after Trump is planning on holding his next Trump rally. Trump's going to start these rallies again, June 26th. A few days after that, June 30th, he's going to go visit the U.S. border wall with Governor Greg Abbott in Texas. Trump is going to reemerge on the political scene, on the public scene pretty soon, folks. And it's interesting now watching how he's planning this whole move. Again, border crisis being one of the biggest topics in the country right now, and Trump moving on that as well as other things. Now, this is according to a statement from Trump's office. Trump said he accepted the invitation from Abbott, again a Republican, to visit, quote, our nation's decimated southern borders, Trump puts it. And Trump says, quote, the Biden administration inherited from me the strongest, safest, and most secure border in U.S. history. And in mere weeks, they turned it into the single worst border crisis in U.S. history. It's an unmitigated disaster zone. And Trump continued stating, we went from detain and remove in terms of how they deal with illegal aliens to catch and release. We went from having border security that was the envy of the world to a lawless border that is now pitied around the world. Now, what Trump is laying out here as well is part of his, let's say, campaign policy going into 2022, then maybe into 2024, as Carl Walden notes in the comments. Again, Trump hasn't officially said he's going to run for president in 2024, but he's hinted at it very strongly. And he's pretty much said the only reason he's not saying it directly is because of some legal issues where I guess he can't technically declare he's running for president just yet. There's some technicalities around it. He's not saying it directly, but he's deeply, deeply suggesting 2024 he's going to run again. In the meantime, though, the goal of Trump and of, well, many Republicans is to retake the House and the Senate. And so Trump, again, on the 26th of this month, is going to start his Trump rallies again, which are going to be going hand in hand with backing different political candidates who he believes would be good, either new candidates, replacements for Democrat candidates, or replacements for Republican candidates who he disagrees with. Trump's pushing, again, his MAGA movement, Make America Great Again movement. And again, not just at the presidential level now at the more local level. Interesting to watch, folks. And on that note, let's talk about Trump's doing. So Epoch Times also reports here, Trump announces first rally and speech since departing the White House. It says former President Donald Trump announced he would be resuming campaign-style rallies. Campaign style is important here. He's technically helping other people campaign, candidates who he's backing. Remember, Trump recently started his own PAC, right? Political Action Committee. And he's even going head-to-head with the RNC, the Republican National Committee, and other PACs that typically work as kind of the, let's say, foundation for the Republican Party. By creating his own PAC and by putting his own candidates into place, Trump is really unseating, really not just trying to go after the Democrats, he's really trying to unseat a lot of the establishment Republicans as well. And the political landscape in the United States is no longer Republican, Democrat, technically. It's Republican, let's say establishment Republican, Democrat, and the MAGA movement, masquerading as the new Republican Party. And this is where it's moving, folks. Now, Trump is going to be resuming again these campaign-style rallies starting next week, and that's going to be in Ohio, according to a statement from his office. The rally, which will be held at the Lorain County Fairgrounds near Cleveland on June 26th, will be the first rally Trump has held since leaving office in January. And at the event, Trump will endorse former advisor Max Miller, who is running for Congress. Again, they're also mixed campaign events, not just Trump rallies, but mixed campaign events. And Trump said this through his Save America PAC on Thursday. Again, his Political Action Committee, really again going head-to-head with the Republican National Committee, the RNC. On this note, Trump said this, according to his PAC, right, his Political Action Committee, says President Trump's first of many appearances in support of candidates and causes that further the MAGA agenda and accomplishments of President Trump's administration. This is going to be the first of many, they're saying, right? Keep an eye out for this, folks. We've been saying it's coming for a while. Next week it begins. Campaigning for 2022. And here we are back again with the whole Trump movement reemerging. We'll have to see, right? It seems to be the case. We'll have to see how much weight it has behind it, but it's reemerging right now. Now, Trump's website is now making mention of the event, and it's also allowing for individuals to register, explaining that the former president, again, the commander-in-chief, right, will deliver remarks at the first post-presidential rally sponsored by Save America. Important to watch for, folks, and again, the first of many. Trump's again going to be holding this event on June 26th, June 30th, then in Texas at the border wall with the governor there in Texas. Now, as this happens, guess what else is going on? I mentioned that this isn't really, again, just Republicans and Democrats anymore. Technically, the Trump movement, it's almost a different party within the Republican Party. It is the branch of the Republican Party that's kind of remaking the grassroots. It's actually interesting if you think about the whole picture of this. Democrats also underwent a big change just like this. You have the squad, you have the, let's say, alt-left, I don't know if that's a word, right? The kind of socialist, Democratic Socialists of America, DSA type movement that has really overtaken the grassroots of the Democrat Party, right? The establishment, essentially Democrats are more, Bush, Biden era type guys. There wasn't a huge difference I think we're seeing between the Bush era guys and the Clinton era type guys, right? That was the establishment era. There's been a change within the grassroots, though, on both parties. For the Democrats, that change has been DSA, Democrat Socialists of America, and similar organizations that have really overtaken the grassroots and really steered the whole party very far left. Now, with the squad individuals like AOC, for example, coming onto the scene, they've really kind of integrated themselves to an extent within the Democrat Party and kind of dictate a lot of what's happening, it seems, with the Democrat Party. The Republican Party also is going through a similar shift. A lot of this started when Trump was elected president, right? Where, again, a lot of Republicans did not support Trump. It was only, again, in the midterms, when, again, the House and Senate went up for re-election, that a lot of he called them rhinos, Republicans in name, only got voted out. But still, a lot of Republicans did not support Trump. Now that Trump is, again, working on the grassroots, not from the presidential level, and he's backing candidates running on the MAGA line, Make America Great Again line, he's not just going after Democrat seats. he's also going after establishment Republican seats. And here's a story on this, folks. Epoch Times reports GOP House members who voted to impeach Trump are going to face MAGA 2022 primary opponents. It says the 10 Republicans who joined the Democrat effort to impeach former President Donald Trump in February, saying he was responsible for the breach of the Capitol, all received criticism from their own home states. While some were censured, others were told to resign. Now, currently, 9 out of the 10 are facing primary challengers from within the GOP. Now, that's Trump's America's First Wing. And so, again, 9 out of the 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Trump have challengers from this new Trump movement. Again, folks, this is going to be the, let's say, remaking, it seems to some extent, of the new Republican Party, I'd say, because Trump was at the top, right? He was president. Now he's kind of going from the grassroots up. This is going to actually really have an interesting impact to watch. Now, on that note, there's some other changes taking place right now from the level of the Supreme Court, and a couple big updates on this. One of them is on Obamacare. Again, that the introductory system of socialized medicine in the United States. Even when Obama passed Obamacare, it was kind of seen as a stepping stone. A lot of people wanted it to be single-payer healthcare. And a lot of people would argue that Obamacare was never really designed to be a permanent system. It was really kind of the stepping stone to single-payer healthcare. And of course, it's seen a lot of flack because it is a socialist healthcare system, one that makes wealthier people pay a whole lot more money. In fact, if you look at the way that health insurance used to cost, you could get a decent health plan prior to all this, prior to Obamacare, for not that much. Maybe a family of 4, you're looking at a couple $100. It wasn't that hard. Blue Cross Blue Shield. These days, you're looking to pay several hundred, if not several thousand, for really the same package, depending on where you're at. But it's interesting now the Supreme Court has ruled on what has been happening. Epoch Times reports Supreme Court tosses Obamacare challenge by 18 states on grounds of legal standing. Now, it's a bit more complicated than what it sounds like in the headline. So let me explain what's going on with this. Now, by a vote of 7-2, the Supreme Court has upheld the Obamacare law for the 3rd time, ducking the question of its constitutionality by ruling that those challenging it lacked the required legal standing to do so. Again, all but 2 of the Supreme Court justices voted to basically say that that the states lacked the standing because 18 states brought this forward, arguing it's unconstitutional. The Supreme Court refused to go to basically rule on whether Obamacare is constitutional or not. And most people would argue it's not constitutional, maybe, which is why they're avoiding that question. Now, this is what they're saying, though, by saying they lack the legal standing to go after it. The law was enacted in March 2010, again under Obama, without a single Republican vote in Congress on the final passage. Remember, you have to pass it to find out what's in it. Remember that, folks? Now, insurance premiums have since skyrocketed. You pay a whole lot more money for insurance than you used to. And many customers have been unable to afford premiums and have lost their insurance. In 2016, Forbes wrote that there is overwhelming evidence that Obamacare caused premiums to increase substantially. Judge Reed O'Connor of the Northern District of Texas ruled on December 14, 2018, that the Obamacare law was unconstitutional in its entirety, right? But stayed enforcement during the appeals process. When Congress in 2017 effectively repealed the mandate that compelled Americans to buy health insurance, it sawed off the last leg that Obamacare stood on, according to the judge. Now, the court finds the individual mandate is essential and inseverable from the other provisions of the statute. In other words, why they're saying there's no legal standing to it, they're saying that because they eliminated the mandate, the element of Obamacare that forced people to pay for it, that you had no choice, that if you refused to buy Obamacare, you would be fined, right? You had to get Obamacare. You had no choice. And remember Obama came in, he said, if you like your health plan, your health care plan, you can keep it. Remember how that was a lie, right? Again, the mandate that you have to buy Obamacare was canceled under Trump. And a lot of judges are arguing that because it was canceled of Obamacare, the thing that it stood on was basically done away with. And because that was done away with, they're arguing it has no standing. Now, the important part with this, though, is that by refusing to rule on whether Obamacare is constitutional or unconstitutional, what the Supreme Court has done is basically allowed Obamacare to stay there on the sidelines, meaning that if Biden wants to rewrite it or put the mandate back in place, it means he can maybe do so. And Biden is already signaling that he's going to make some changes to Obamacare, maybe based on this. We'll have to see what happens with it. We'll have to see what happens, folks, again, as this goes forward. But again, the Supreme Court has refused to rule on whether or not it's constitutional and basically is keeping Obamacare sitting on the sidelines. Now, another story here on the Supreme Court. Epoch Times again reports, Supreme Court rules foster agencies can deny certification to same-sex couples on religious grounds. And so you do have the Supreme Court ruling to not really go after Obamacare based on constitutional grounds. They're not going to say it's constitutional or unconstitutional, but they are ruling on the constitutionality, again, of if individuals who have religious beliefs that don't support gay marriage and things like this, that they can deny, again, certification for same-sex couples. It says here, the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously ruled on Thursday that a Catholic foster agency in Philadelphia was free to turn away same-sex couples as foster parents on grounds of religious freedom. So they're ruling that it is a religious freedom issue, and they had the grounds to do so. The decision comes in the case of Fulton versus City of Philadelphia, in which Catholic Social Services sued the city after being ordered not to exclude same-sex couples from certification in a 9-0 ruling. The High Court found that the City of Philadelphia violated the First Amendment when it refused to continue contracting with CSS, this Catholic Social Services, which does not certify unmarried couples or same-sex couples as foster parents on religious grounds. In other words, folks, they have the religious freedom to make that decision. So here you have the Supreme Court ruling on the constitutionality of one thing, but not on something else. We'll have to see how it goes going forward. The Supreme Court is a bit unpredictable right now. On some issues, they are very conservative. This one, for example. On others, not so much. And again, folks, we'll have to see how it goes going forward. It's important to note, actually, with this, the Supreme Court actually ruled 9-0 in support of the religious freedom of these individuals. And so this wasn't even technically Democrats and Republican appointed. This was the entire Supreme Court ruling in favor on the constitutionality for the Catholic organization. Now, folks, on that note, let's go into what's happening a bit with Russia and China. Quite a bit going on. And I've been following this a bit. We've been talking about it a bit. Interesting developments. Right now, Trump is saying the Biden-Putin summit was a good day for Russia, while the U.S. got nothing. Biden basically just made a bit of a deal with Russia. And it's interesting to watch how this is going because there's a bit more to it, I'd say. And I'll explain why. Now, let's go over this first. It says, former President Donald Trump gave a critical take on Wednesday's U.S.-Russia summit in Switzerland, arguing that Washington got nothing in return for boosting Moscow's profile on the international stage. And Trump said, we gave a very big stage to Russia and we got nothing. He told us to Fox News' Hannity. He says, I think it was a good day for Russia. I don't think we got anything out of it. Now, as this happens, Biden is saying that there were no threats. And he said when he was talking with Putin, and he said the last thing that Putin wants right now is a new Cold War. And the timing of this is interesting. Now, following a closed-door meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, President Joe Biden said his agenda isn't designed to go against Russia, but that he's attempting to promote the interests of the American people. And he continued further on, we need to have some basic rules of the road that we can all abide by. And he added the last thing Putin wants is a new Cold War. Now, the timing of this is interesting, folks, and I'll explain why this is. This is really Biden. Really, remember, Biden was vice president with Obama. What did Obama do? Obama had the New START treaty, where they went and approached Russia, and they, made this new start, a new start of diplomatic relations with Russia. It included nuclear deals, and included around the same time Uranium One, where we started selling American and some Canadian uranium companies to the Russians, giving Russia control over a lot of U.S. uranium. It was really a diplomatic shift. What happens? Well, Russia goes and invades Ukraine. Diplomacy kind of falls apart for a while. And of course, Russia and China are very closely aligned. But on this note, one thing they made, U.S. and Russia agreed to start talks on preventing cyber attacks. But the interesting part of it is this. This really relates to Russia-China relations and how this ties to U.S.-China relations. Very similar to what Richard Nixon did during the Cold War, where again, the assessment of the United States during the Cold War, when you had the Soviet Union, you had the Chinese Communist Party, still the Chinese Communist Party, you had the Soviet Union, you had the Chinese Communist Party. The U.S. assessment was that if a physical, real kinetic war broke out between the free world and the communist world, that the United States could take on Russia or they could take on China, but they could not take on both. And so China and Russia, the Soviet Union and China, they had actually small arms battles. They had some battles take place, like the Amur Valley conflict. And it was during that time when tensions were actually very high between the Soviet Union and the Chinese Communist Party that Nixon stepped in, made a deal with China, and tried to drive a wedge between China, the Chinese Communist Party, and the Soviet Union. And it's interesting here, as we're talking, that again, Russia is very close to the Chinese Communist Party, especially because of international sanctions, especially because of the way that the Russian economy has been hit by sanctions and other deals like that. Biden gave some of that back to Russia. And at the same time this is happening, really things are falling apart with the relations with the Chinese Communist Party, not just with the U.S., but with many countries in the world. And as this happens, Biden is clarifying the Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping is not an old friend. And he's questioning, again, Beijing's desire to find the virus origin. I'll go into this in just a bit, folks, what's happening with China. Then we'll go to some questions. First, though, again, folks, as I mentioned before, Crossroads is totally demonetized on YouTube. We don't have Super Chat. We don't have advertisements. But we have created our own platform. That's epochtv.com/Crossroads. That's our uncensored video platform. Crossroads is there. We have a whole bunch of other shows there. We're working on some special features there. We have a lot of exclusive content there. Folks, if you want to support Crossroads, please check it out. Also, please tell a friend or family member about it if you want to go the extra mile. It really helps us. I will show you a quick preview right now of what we're working on over there.
Right now in our country, the Constitution is the biggest barrier to the left having control over everything it wants. It limits what government can do. It protects the rights that we are given by God. In order to tear down the Constitution, you got to tear down the people who wrote it. You have to tear down the founders. And that's what the 1619 Project is about. The First Amendment, we have 5 freedoms in it. Congress can't block any of that. So what they've done instead is Section 230 liability waivers. You have people in Congress explicitly urging these big tech monopolists who control the entire online market for speech. Facebook, I believe, was putting together vaccination scores on people. And if you were vaccine skeptical, they would downplay, deplatform things that you said that were related to it to make sure other people didn't see it. And if you can do it on that, you can do it on anything. You can do it on any topic. You can do it to any person for any reason. And that's really scary.
All right, folks, that's Sean Davis. He's the co-founder of the Federalist. Great interview. Check it out again on Epoch TV. And again, folks, you want to support Crossroads, please check out epochtv.com/Crossroads. Now, I'm going to go into some questions in just a bit, but let me talk a bit more what's happening with Russia and China. It's important. And Dave Johnson, he said Crossroads is not live. We are totally live. We are totally live tonight. We'll go into some questions in just a bit, but let me just go over this a bit more first. Now, again, as the U.S. is kind of opening the door for diplomatic relations with Russia, and remember, Trump kind of wanted to do that too. He couldn't because they were trying to accuse Trump of being a Putin, agent and stuff like this. Remember the whole Trump-Russia conspiracy that fell to pieces? Turned out it was a whole disinformation campaign. right? Remember the whole Trump-Russia thing fell apart? Trump really was open to fixing relations with Russia, right? He wasn't against it. Biden now is reopening relations with Russia, right? While at the same time, really still taking a pretty strong stance against the Chinese Communist Party, which is interesting to watch. And this is not even just a U.S. issue now. This is a global issue. The European Union, Australia, India, many countries are starting to take stronger stances against the Chinese Communist Party. Not to say that the business deals and the financial interests aren't still there, because one of the big problems you have is that a lot of the way the CCP runs unconventional warfare operations to subvert foreign societies is by manipulating the markets, by controlling other countries through finance and things like this. So having that door open still is problematic, and the CCP is working on some of those issues to make it even worse. But diplomatically, from the political level, you do see pushback. And so while, again, the Biden administration is rebuilding relations with Russia, they're moving further away from the Chinese Communist Party, really dividing these two powers. It's interesting to watch. So let's go over what's happening real quick. It says here, Biden says Chinese leader Xi Jinping, is not an old friend. And he's also questioning the CCP's desire to find the origin of the virus. Now, Chinese leader Xi Jinping is not President Joe Biden's old friend, Biden said on June 16th, as he raised concerns about Beijing's willingness to help find the origins of the CCP virus pandemic. And briefly on this as well, a couple other stories. The European Union's digital COVID certificate, which is the European Union, folks, has now made a vaccine passport. They put it in place. But it excludes China-made vaccines, and the Chinese Communist Party is retaliating by lashing out at them diplomatically. Really not a smart move if you think about it from the Chinese Communist Party going after countries like that, but really further isolating itself from the global community. At the same time, the CCP is going against NATO. It says Chinese regime repeats that NATO is brain dead. That's what they're saying. An attempt at retaliation. Now, another story here on this note, right? Xi Jinping, Epoch Times reports, Xi wants officials to get two-faced in spreading the CCP's agenda to the world. And at the same time, another story says Biden's Asia nominee says U.S. should develop Taiwan ties in every sector. Really, folks, a lot of shifts taking place right now between the United States, China, and Russia. It may not seem like a huge issue, but the Taiwan issue, if Biden's Asia nominee says the U.S. should develop Taiwan ties in every sector, this will anger the Chinese Communist Party more than almost anything. And again, I won't go too deep into it because I explained it a bit last episode. Taiwan used to be the official government of China. After the Chinese Communist Party took over China, right, in the late 1940s, right? The Kuomintang, which was technically the government of China, fled to the island of Formosa and built the country of Taiwan, right? A little before that, but technically, right? When they did that, Taiwan was actually recognized by the international community, the United States and other countries, as the official government of China, the government in exile of China. The CCP has since overtaken that. But the CCP still is not considered official. If, again, Chinese people would say the Chinese Communist Party does not have the mandate of heaven, as they would call it. And so Taiwan is a threat to the very legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party. And if other countries start recognizing Taiwan diplomatically, for the Chinese Communist Party, this means that its official, facade falls apart. This is a big deal for the Chinese Communist Party. All right, folks, that said, a few other things going on, but let's go into some questions because it's getting a bit late. I'm going to make sure we get to some of them. First off, folks, let's see. This is from Crazy Morp. He said, Josh, question here. Why did Mark and Patricia McCloskey plead guilty? That was the couple that pulled out guns on BLM protesters after they stormed their neighborhood. I don't get what they did wrong. Well, yeah, so long story short, you had this couple who, again, you had Black Lives Matter protesters, right, trespass into a private area. Individuals, two of them, you might remember the guy, he had the pink polo shirt on with what looked like a Vietnam-era M16, and his wife had a pistol, and, she's like sweeping the crowd with it, right? those two individuals technically in some states would not have been charged. Technically in some states, again, some states have castle doctrine. They could have even shot someone in some states and nothing would have happened, right? Other states are a lot more strict with it. And again, you had Black Lives Matter protesters at this time, vandalizing public property, beating people to death, burning down businesses and so on, burning down communities, all that stuff. And that was in the context of them doing that. Now, why did they plead guilty? Maybe they assessed that they wouldn't get a decent jury. Maybe they assessed that the pushback on them was going to be much less severe than just pleading guilty and getting a plea bargain. Both of them are lawyers, and so I'm sure this is well calculated. At the same time, I believe it's Mark talking now about running for political office, and so we'll have to see what happens with that. This is from Denise Coop, and Denise, always good seeing you here. He said, Josh, what do you think of the Admiral of the Navy having his officer read Ibram X. Kendi's book? It does seem from his answer before the Senate that he's been radicalized. So Ibram X. Kendi was one of the main individuals who framed a lot of the narratives being used by the critical race theory re-education program going on in the United States. And folks, you're being re-educated, just like they had re-education camps in the Soviet Union and re-education camps in China still do. Really, critical race theory is a re-education program. It's rewriting the history of the United States on false premise, part of that being 1619 Project by New York Times, part of that being the works of Ibram X. Kendi, a falsifying of U.S. history, and one that really pushes for racial discrimination. In fact, Ibram X. Kendi, I believe, even talks about using discrimination to defeat discrimination, is the way he puts it, which technically is a violation of the Civil Rights Act. Technically, under the Civil Rights Act, you're not allowed to discriminate based on race or ethnic origin, right? Ethnic background, including white people, right? Being white is a racial ethnicity. And yes, discriminating based on someone's racial ethnicity is discrimination and is a violation of the Civil Rights Act. On that note, technically, yes, these are individuals talking about engaging in racial discrimination, and to be citing that work, he's citing that element of it. I would say in a sane society, this would be considered someone becoming radicalized by a very radical, very racist, and very discriminatory body of work. Really, critical race theory, Ibram X. Kendi, 1619 Project. Next one is from Shannon Haney. You said, Josh, have you seen the Media Matters article attacking the independent YouTube creators covering the audits? Many of them were then permanently removed from YouTube. Yeah, Media Matters is a clown organization, to say the least. They're really just a political hack group, right? Political disinformation. That a lot of these fact checkers, right? They do a lot of selective reporting, and they omit a lot of information, and they falsely represent a lot of information, to say the least. They've been doing this, folks, and then of course fact checkers working with Google, fact checkers working with Facebook, with Twitter. They then use this to, let's say, lower the standing of websites, of channels, and so on. Crossroads, for example, you might notice, folks, that the subscriptions on Crossroads on YouTube is like frozen for like months. And before we got censored, I mean, really, we were looking at 100K every month and a half at one point before they cracked down on it. Again, one of the reasons why we had to start Epoch TV, again, an uncensored platform for this stuff. They do this stuff, folks. In fact, if you want to watch a great interview on that, speaking of which, check out the interview we did with Sean Davis. You can find the trailer for it on Crossroads on YouTube, but the full interview is on the Epoch TV. Fantastic interview. We go over the disinformation. We go over the deception of disinformation, and actually how a lot of this whole structure works and what they do exactly. We go over the whole thing. I think you folks will really enjoy it. We go over a couple more questions, folks. Then we're going to jump over to Epoch TV to talk about the audits taking place in the election investigations. First, let's see. This is from Dave H. Castro. He said, do you think that Republic of China, i.e. Taiwan, can become the official party of China again? Hard to say if it will become the official party of China, whether Taiwan will become like the government of China again. Diplomatically, it might become recognized as such. I actually, if the CCP continues on the trajectory it's on of, telling NATO that they're, calling NATO names and threatening European Union countries and going at, starting border wars with India and, criticizing and threatening trade war in Australia and sanctioning U.S. officials. I mean, it's the CCP is not acting totally rational right now, to be honest. Right under Deng Xiaoping, a few leaders back, they had a policy of bide your time and hide your strength. They talked about the peaceful rise of China, right? Engage economically, control other countries through economic means, so on, right? They threw that out the window, maybe a bit too soon, because the CCP is burning all of its diplomatic branches around the world. All of its roads diplomatically right now are just on fire, right? They're burning to the ground. Even the Biden administration, which a lot of people thought may be more closer to China because Biden did engage very closely with Xi when he was vice president. Even he's still taking a pretty decently strong stance against the CCP. As things go forward, Taiwan, especially during the pandemic, really emerged on the world stage because Taiwan really came out as one of the, like a very reasonable and responsible voice in terms of dealing with the virus. Remember, folks, the lockdowns and mask mandates, that was the Chinese Communist Party's model. Selective lockdowns, like if you get the virus and you have to quarantine, that was the Taiwanese model. And it worked really well in Taiwan, right? You're not locking down, shutting down the entire economy, but if a person gets sick, they quarantine. That's what Taiwan did, and it worked. Taiwan really emerged as a voice of reason during the pandemic, and Taiwan really emerged on the world stage because of that. It is very possible that Taiwan could become diplomatically recognized once again as kind of the official China. Let's see what goes on with this, folks. That said, let's jump over to Epoch TV now. As I mentioned, folks, we're totally demonetized on YouTube. We can't keep, if we're just on YouTube, we're gonna disappear eventually because we're totally demonetized and we can't do anything here other than, again, to give you great content, right? So, folks, again, if you want to support Crossroads, please check out epochtv.com/Crossroads. We're going to jump over there now, and we're going to do the segment talking about the election investigations, the election audits. Folks, check out the link in the description or the link in the chat over there. And for those of you who don't want to, still really appreciate you, folks. Always great having you here. And as always, folks, again, please take care of yourselves. Stay informed. Stay free. Thank you. We'll see you over there. Stay informed and stay free.
Let us tell your story.
Facts always matter.
Hearing from everyone, from newsmakers to people just like you.
Deep dive interviews that challenge assumptions.
Bringing fast, compelling, first-hand news from China.